Well, welcome to the North Bingham County Historical Park. This park is all about hands-on education, and so this year we're starting out something new, which is surviving off of my backyard. And we have been running classes. I don't know if you followed it on Facebook. Is that where you saw it?
A friend told me.
Oh, good, good. Well, next week there will be sourdough bread, and then the following week will be small meat animals. Okay? All right, and they're at the same time place. The general store is open, and we would like it if you could register and give us your information so we can make sure that you get other classes that are coming. Okay? Okay, good. So this is Sue Gilmore. She is an certified herbalist.
Master herbalist.
Master herbalist, yes, and has graciously hauled all of her kitchen down here for us to be able to teach us about herbs. So I'll just turn it over to you.
Okay, so I've got a couple of handouts for everybody. It'll help you visualize what we're talking about. I think everybody's interested in, what are the top 5 herbs I should have in my garden. When I sat down to figure out my top 5, I came up with my top 15 because I couldn't narrow it down. I have to have these 15. So I think if you ask any herbalist, they're going to have their own top 5, 10 or 15 herbs, and you should too, based on what your family needs are. And so be thinking about that as we're just going to talk about a few herbs today. Next Saturday I'll be doing a free garden tour, herb garden tour at my place from 10 to noon. I'm going to be competing with what's going on here, but you'll be able to see all of these herbs that we're going to talk about today and a lot more. And hopefully that'll give you kind of an idea of the herbs that you might want to put in your garden. To complete my Master Herbalist certification, I had to memorize Dr. Christopher's list of 100, his favorite 100 herbs. And that was daunting. Latin name, common name, primary medicinal use, and I had to be able to recognize the plant from a pressing for my final exam. And it was just daunting, that many herbs. And then after I completed my exams and was starting to talk to people in the area, the second question that I get a lot is, so what already grows here that I can use? And it got me thinking about Dr. Christopher's list of 100 herbs. Some of the plants on his list don't grow here. Myrrh trees don't grow here. They grow in Saudi Arabia and they just don't do well here. And a lot of herbalists love using myrrh. The only way to get it is from an online source. So what if that source dries up? Availability becomes scarce, prices go up, and I can't get it. What can I use that is here? So that started me on a quest of finding out what does grow here. And when I came up with a list of 120 plants, I thought, oh my goodness, this is way too overwhelming because I can't memorize that many plants and stay familiar with what I had already learned. And so as I looked at this list of 120 plants, I noticed, okay, well, we've got a bunch of weeds here. We've got a bunch of plants that are good for first aid. There's some culinary herbs and spices. And I thought, okay, let's break this big list of 120 plants down into groups of 20. Because you can kind of wrap your head around 20 plants that have a common denominator, like medicinal weeds or the first aid herbs or the culinary herbs and spices. And to help me keep all this information at my fingertips instead of my head, I put the information into an herbal reference, what I call an herbal reference manual. So I grouped the 20 medicinal weeds into a reference manual, and I use these manuals all the time. I go back and you know, what is this good for? How do I grow this? Is it going to be happy in this location? You know, this reference manual just tells me a lot about these medicinal weeds. And so then I've got a book on the first aid, reference manual on the first aid herbs. And then I did one on the culinary herbs and spices. And then as I started teaching classes, people wanted to have copies. And so that's kind of how these books were born. And they wanted to know, how do I make remedies out of all these plants? So this reference manual on making herbal remedies was born. And as I was studying all these herbs, you know, I had to memorize the primary medicinal usage of Dr. Christopher's 100 plants. But these plants have 12 to 15 to 20 health benefits or uses. And I mean, it's just, you know, the mind storage capacity just got overwhelming. And so how do you narrow down all those options to the best choice for me or for you, for your body, for what's going on with you? And so I did a couple of years of study with some clinical herbalists and came up with 3 secrets to choosing the best herbal remedy. And this has really helped me kind of, you know, focus on what is the root cause of what's going on and what kind of herb do I need to balance that and, you know, bring my body back into balance. So that's what this book is all about. And I've got a few of those manuals here today. If any of that information interests you, you're welcome to pick those up today. So I'm still in the process of studying my list of 120. The next manual that's coming out will be on flowering plants that you could put in your flower beds. Some common that you probably already have in your flower beds, but some that would add beauty as well as, you know, being medicinal to your flower beds. And then there's 20 trees, shrubs, or ground covers that have medicinal properties. And then there are some herbs that are very food-like. And so I thought, okay, is this a food or is this an herb? And what makes it medicinal, a medicinal herb or a medicinal food? And I thought, okay, that's just a whole nother ball of wax, but that's the, you know, kind of finishes out the list of 120 plants that I found that grow in this area that can be used medicinally. So those manuals are in the works. Another of my Master Herbalist certification assignments was to design an herb garden. And my first thought was kind of like what you see on your handout, this first diagram. Very traditional, fancy, formal, well-organized herb garden. And they come in all different shapes and sizes. And so I designed, the house that we moved into here in Shelley really didn't have any landscaping. So I thought, okay, I've got a blank slate. I can do whatever. And so the design that I made for my assignment was very elaborate. And I thought, this is going to be a lot of fun. This is going to be a lot of work. And it's going to take a lot of maintenance. And so I thought, okay, not gonna go down that road. I'm looking to retire, not to start a new career, kind of thing. And so if you have kids or the money to hire a gardener, then something fancy might be an option to consider, because they are fun and they are beautiful. I came across a book that discussed the history of the medicinal gardens, or the gardens in the monasteries back in the Middle Ages. And I thought it was fascinating. And they had a kitchen garden where they grew their fruits and vegetables, and beyond that was a fruit orchard, and that was by the kitchen of the monastery. I thought, well, that makes sense, right? And then they had what's called a physics garden, which had all the medicinal herbs, and that was by the apothecary. Well, that makes sense. And then if they had additional space and time on their hands to kill, then they had meditation gardens and prayer gardens and beautiful gardens, and how nice to just have all the time in the world to do nothing but garden and pray and meditate. And as I looked at the layouts of the physics gardens, they looked a lot like this picture on your handout, except they probably didn't use raised grow boxes. They were just in the ground, but the same idea. Well-organized plots with ample walkways in between. And I thought, that kind of looks like a Mittlighter garden. And my husband and I have adopted the Mittlighter gardening method, which, if you're not familiar, this is the book. That is, it's a step-by-step, fail-safe method of gardening successfully. And my husband has how many YouTube videos? 600 YouTube videos. And anything he does in the Mittlighter garden, he makes a video of it and he posts it on his YouTube channel, which is ldsprepper.com. And so you can go to that playlist and you can see how everything is done. You can get the book and read how everything was done. And then you can grow. This was just harvested a couple of days ago. Was this like, a 3.5 pound head of cauliflower? And almost 3 pounds head of broccoli. And so we've got several others in the greenhouse that will be harvested shortly. So growing food as if your life depends on it. So check out ldsprepper.com, the YouTube channel, and the books, the micronutrients, the recipe for the weekly feed fertilizer are all available at ldsprepperstore.com, or you can come by the house. So I quickly decided simple. If you look, it might be kind of hard to see this diagram down here. 4 stakes and a string maps out a soil bed area. And you can make it as long as you want, 10 feet, 20 feet, 30 feet. And, for 5 to 15 herbs, you could get all of that in an 18-inch wide by 30-foot long garden bed, easily. I've got, in my herb garden, I've got five grow boxes. They're 20 feet long, they're 18 inches wide, and I've got 3.5 feet in between each box and 5 feet around the perimeter. And that's what Jacob Mittlighter, who developed this gardening method, he found that's what worked best. Wherever he gardened, he taught people how to garden or to grow food as if their lives depend on it in almost 50 countries around the world, I think. It's amazing what he accomplished. But it's a very simple method. It doesn't have to be expensive. You can start with a string and 4 stakes. You can go with the grow box if you want, or, you know, graduate from strings to box at some point. So that's how I design my herb garden, and I can get between 40 and 100 herbs in that garden. And I try to grow everything that's in my reference manuals in my garden, because I do classes and I do garden tours, and I want people to be able to see the plants and touch them and become acquainted with them, because there are lookalikes out there that if you mistake hound's tongue for comfrey, you know, you're in trouble. You mistake foxglove for comfrey and you're dead. And so it's really important to get to know the plants up close and personal. You can tell more from seeing them in person than you can from a picture. So that's the purpose of my herb garden. And I've got some of the lookalikes around our property, so I can say, you know, is this hound's tongue or is it comfrey? Is this hound's tongue or is it comfrey? And you know, just help people become acquainted with the differences so they don't make a fatal mistake. So let's go to the back of the handout. 4 easy to grow medicinal plants. Oh, another option that you might consider. If you don't have room in your garden or your backyard for an 18-inch wide by 30-foot row, you could consider pots, containers. A lot of these herbs grow well in containers, especially if you're an apartment kind of thing and you've only got a small balcony. You can still have your top 5 medicinal plants growing in a pot on your balcony. Or if you're landscaping, you know, if your backyard doesn't allow for anything new, consider interspersing some of these plants into your landscape. When we lived in Texas, we had a big house on a small lot, and we were trying to grow as much food as we could in the backyard, and I thought, why not plant some vegetables in the flower bed out front? And so I planted some Swiss chard and some broccoli, some kale, and some purple cabbages out in the front flower beds. And the neighbor ladies came by one day and they're looking at my flower bed. Is that broccoli? And I'm going, yeah, that's broccoli. And they thought, you know, I've never seen that before. So it may be unusual, but broccoli makes a beautiful backdrop to flowers. And it's a good use of space, so why not increase the space in which you can grow food on your property and have it look good too. So consider that with the medicinal herbs as well. A little bit later, I'm going to demonstrate how to turn some dried, well, to make an oil infusion with some dried herbs and then turn it into a salve or an ointment. So this is 1 ounce of ground up calendula flowers. And when I turn this into an oil infusion, it'll fill 2 4-ounce jars. 1 ounce filled this jar packed, okay? And these are quite fluffy, the calendula flowers. So 1 ounce, you know, I kept putting flowers in here and packing them down, and it filled the top. So that's 1 ounce. And then I used a Mr. Coffee grinder to coarsely grind that, and that's what I ended up with. When I grew this, I had 10 calendula plants in an 18-inch wide by 5-foot long area. And I didn't need that much. I mean, this is 2 years old, these calendula flowers. So, you know, depending on how many kids you've got, how many, you know, health issues or boo-boos or whatever they get on a regular basis. The great thing about these herbs, you know, especially calendula, it comes back every year. If you leave a few flower buds, you'll have calendula everywhere. So it doesn't take a lot of plants to grow the medicine that you need. I've sectioned off my grow boxes into kind of 2.5-foot sections, and some plants are bigger and have a bigger spread than others, but that's kind of, you know, 2.5-foot area is more than you need to harvest plants every year to make remedies that'll get you through the winter. And then come spring, you can start all over. And like with the garlic, you know, before I realized it doesn't take a 10-foot section of garlic to have enough to get you through the year. I've got garlic in the freezer that there was no need to plant garlic last fall because I had plenty still. Yes, a single plant is often enough, and you just need one to get started. And then if you like it, I mean, I like some of these plants just for the way they look, and so you can have as many or as few as you want. So comfrey, it's a perennial shrub. It'll tolerate full sun, but if it has some partial shade, the leaves get really big. And bigger leaves mean more medicine. So, but if all that you've got is full sun, it'll grow in full sun. And it flowers. The seeds are really hard to start, but you can pull a plant up and cut the roots up and plant each portion of the roots, and you'll get a new plant. So I recently heard of a gentleman who he had comfrey everywhere in a field out by his house, and he hated it and wanted to get rid of it. So he got out his rototiller. Yeah, he just multiplied by 1,000,000 his comfrey plant. So it propagates very easily. I had too many plants growing in the area of my grow box, and so I pulled up plants and I didn't get all the roots, and then I added some more sawdust to my soil mix, and pretty soon I had comfrey over here and comfrey over there, and so it's easy to have it all the time. It's you don't have to reseed. It's just going to come back every year, and as you harvest, you'll get new plants. It's almost.
You want the leaves from the comfrey?
The leaves have the medicine. The roots have more medicine. So when you get a big clump of comfrey, you can divide it in the spring. You know, divide that plant in half, keep half, and use the other half of the roots for medicine. Just dry them out. Cut them up first. So if you think like a plant, in the spring it's taking energy from the roots to grow stems and leaves. And so when a plant is putting out its leaves, that's when you harvest leaves, because they're going to have the most medicine. For perennials in the fall, they're taking whatever is left from the aerial parts and they're pulling it back into the roots so that they can get through the winter. So you can harvest again in fall, the roots, or you can do early spring before the plant is really starting to put out new growth. Flowers you want to get as soon as they open, because that's when they're the strongest, as a general rule of thumb. Calendula, easy to grow, flowering plant. It seeds very readily, so you know, just let a few flowers go to seed every year and you'll have plenty of plants for next year's crop. It's a great wound healing. Oh, I should mention with Comfrey, it has a compound in it called allantoin, which causes, or it helps cells to multiply fast. So when you've got an injury and you put Comfrey on it, those cells that are injured are stimulated to replicate quickly, and so your injury heals faster. The healing properties of Comfrey penetrate the skin and get in the blood, your circulation, and goes to all the tissues, especially, you know, when you've got an injury and you get redness or a little bit of inflammation. The redness is an indication that blood is being sent to that area to promote healing. And, you know, so whatever herbs you apply topically are going to get into that blood supply right there very quickly to promote healing. Comfrey also contains a substance called mucilage, which is very soothing to mucous membranes and also helps with healing. So it, you know, injuries, you get cut, get injured. There's something called nociceptors close to the surface of the skin. That's what, you know, they get injured, they start sparking. I mean, that's where the pain comes from, is those nociceptors sparking. And so Comfrey just helps calm that down. Calendula helps calm that down. Reduce, anytime there's inflammation, there's usually pain, associated pain. So most of these herbs they're called anti-inflammatory, but they're really modulators. They help modulate the inflammation because inflammation is a necessary part of the healing process in the body. So the herbs just help modulate the inflammation so that it reduces the pain. The pain also prevents you from, or it should help prevent you from doing more damage to yourself. So, you know, a couple of months ago I sprained my thumb, and it still hurts because I didn't immobilize it and I didn't let it, you know, didn't let it heal. So, I mean, we need our thumbs for lots of things. So it's just good. Yeah, so that one's going to take a long time, but typically these herbs help modulate that inflammation to promote healing and to protect you from hurting yourself more. There was nothing torn or cut, so the allantoin isn't doing anything for that. But if you have a broken bone, one of the nicknames of Comfrey is knit bone or bone set, and it will actually cause the bone to heal, you know, to grow back together. One of my master herbalist teachers, she's also a midwife. When she was first starting her herbal studies, a friend of her son's was in, this is an older teenager, was in a bike accident and just shattered his forearm and elbow. And the doctors, we can't pin it back together. I mean, there are so many fragments, we can't, you know, we can't do anything. They didn't know how to surgically repair it because there were just so many shards. And so she said, okay, well, she got out a big canning pot and she boiled down some Comfrey, and she had this kid over at her house just soaking his arm and elbow in this Comfrey tea bath for weeks. And the bones went back together the way they're supposed to. I mean, first they started to kind of soften and become cartilage, and then they hardened up into bones. And this kid went back to the doctor. He had to get checked out before he could serve a church mission. They had it x-rayed. The doctors were like, I can't tell it was ever broken. It healed perfectly. And they were baffled. How did you do that? And so comfrey is a very powerful herb, and it's why it's on my top 15 and in my garden, because I just don't ever want to be without it for whatever happens. Your question, how do you use it? Use it fresh while it's growing. Dry some to have on hand during the winter when it's not growing. You can make a tea out of both. You can make poultices out of both.
Put it in a blender and grind it up.
Lots of different ways to use it. And that's kind of what I talk about in here. You know, how do you take these herbs and use them medicinally? There's lots of good ideas. St. John's wort is probably a beautiful little flowering bush. You may or may not be familiar with it. It's most famous for its calming. We call that, when it affects the nerves in the body and nerving, it has a very calming effect and an antispasmodic effect in injuries. But also helps people who have anxiety issues or depression. So that's what it's mostly known for. But it's a great healing herb, and it's easy to grow. It's perennial. It comes back every year. You harvest the leaves and the flowers. You dry them for winter use, or use them fresh while they're fresh. So it's a good companion herb to have on hand. And plantain, it's a common lawn weed. You find it everywhere. And if it grows in your lawn, if you don't spray your lawn with anything, then you can take advantage of plantain, or you can take it out of your lawn and put it somewhere where it will be happy. And every year it gets a little bit bigger, and which means more medicine. So it's really easy to grow. It just is everywhere.
It's the leaves, right?
It's
the flowers are so small.
Yeah, it does. It has a flowering stalk,
Yeah.
but it doesn't really look like it has flowers.
Right.
But it does produce seed, and those do blow in the wind and go all over your lawn. So it's a great plant. So if you look on the front of your handout, there is a chart there that compares the wound healing properties of all four of those plants. And if you look at plantain, it does everything except maybe the nervine aspect of St. John's wort. And so when you can find one plant that will kind of do it all, you've got a really great plant. And so plantain is one of those that's on my top 15. There's a veterinarian, Dr. Patrick Jones. He's out in the Twin Falls area. He tells a story of a friend of his who's a survivalist, likes to go out in the middle of nowhere, kind of, just wearing a loincloth and living off the land, the kind of guy. And he was out there doing his thing one year and was climbing a rock face cliff. And when he, reached up to grab a ledge, he didn't see a rattlesnake there, and he got bit. And so he thought, okay, so he climbs down the rock face. He remembered seeing some plantain over by a stream bed. So he parked himself there by the stream bed and chewed up some plantain leaves, put it on the snake bite, waited until it turned black, and then got some more. And he just sucked on the plantain leaves in between. And he just kind of poulticed his snake bite for 24 hours. and no red streaks up his arm. Plantain it has a drawing action. It draws poisons and toxins out. It draws splinters out. I've used it on splinters. Fortunately, I haven't had a snake bite. I did have a scorpion sting last year, and scorpions, their venom is neurotoxin, which is different than hobo spiders and rattlesnakes and the kind of critters that we're used to here. So I used the plantain. I had plantain ointment with me and used it as a drawing agent, and these two fingers were just kind of going like this on their own. That's kind of what the neurotoxin does. It just made everything twitch and go numb. And, when my throat went numb, I got scared. Am I gonna die? And so I learned a lot from that experience. But plantain is one of those herbs I just don't want to be without. Question?
I had my daughter's wedding here in August last year, and the wasps were horrible. And we had people getting stung left and right, and so my another daughter was like chewing up plantain and slapping it on people as fast as we could. And it helped. It was very soothing, really fast.
Yes, plantain is excellent for any kind of insect sting or bite. Already this year, I think I've been stung a couple of times by wasps in our greenhouse because there are pollinators. And they don't like you messing with the plants when they're in there doing their thing. So, and that kind of brings me to the recipes. This Burns and Boo Boo oil or salve is a recipe that Rosemary Gladstar, famous herbalist, lives in Vermont. She created this years ago from calendula, comfrey, and St. John's wort for healing burns. And so the last time I got stung by a wasp, I ran into the house and I had my Burns and Boo Boo salve, and I wondered if this would help. And I put it on the sting, and it's not really helping. So I grabbed my plantain oil and rubbed it in, and almost immediately the pain was gone. And then continuing to rub it in, it helped with eventually the sting area gets red and hot and a little bit swollen, and then it itches, and plantain just helped with all of that. So the Burns and Boo Boo salve, you have the recipe there that's what you can do with these 3 herbs. Turn it into an oil infusion, mix those together, I forgot to bring my Burns and Boo Boo salve jar. Anyway, you can make a salve or an ointment out of it. What I'm going to demonstrate for you today is how to turn dried herbs into an oil and then into a salve. And I'm going to do that, I'm going to show you. I started, to begin with, I told you about the measuring out an ounce of calendula flowers. And when you grind them up, if you don't have a Mr. Coffee grinder, you can use a blender. You just want to, start breaking up the cell walls so that when you make an infusion, the plant medicine gets into the oil or the tea or water, whatever solvent you're using, helps it get into the solution faster. So I ground up some calendula flowers, and then about 3 or 4 years ago, I came across an herbalist who mixes her dried herbs with vodka, 100 proof vodka. And that it starts the extraction process, and she gets a more potent end result. So I did an experiment with one of the classes that I was teaching. I had students do the old-fashioned method, just take where'd they go? The calendula flowers, right there. Just take these, put them in a jar, put some oil on top, and let it macerate for 4 to 6 weeks. And then we were using chickweed, so then they took some chickweed and they ground it up and they mixed it with vodka and they let it sit overnight, and then the next day poured the oil over it and let it steep. And the color difference was amazing with chickweed. And in the olive oil, you couldn't tell the oil had changed color at all, but with the vodka, it just extracted more medicine from the plants, and it was a deeper, richer green color. So you would assume you're getting more potent plant medicine if there's a good color change. I had one student come back to me and said, I used both versions on my son who had a skin rash, and they both worked. Good. It's nice to know that all you have to do is take the herbs, cover them with oil, let them infuse in a sunny window for 4 to 6 weeks, and it's good medicine. Or you can speed it along by adding the vodka to it. So either way works. So I'm just going to add these pre-soaked calendula flowers into a jar. This is a pint jar.
You said pre-soaked?
Pre-soaked, meaning pre-soaked in vodka.
Those are already done. For how long?
Just overnight. So, and rule of thumb this herbalist gave was, if you've got an ounce of herbs, you'll use half an ounce of vodka. And then she said, and sometimes some plants need a little bit more. So I found with calendula, a little bit more was better. So 1 ounce, which is 2 tablespoons of vodka, 1 ounce of herbs. And there's a remedy called golden salve that is made with calendula flowers. The oil turns out just golden and beautiful. And so, which one here is calendula? This one. So I don't know if you can see. You have to be looking that way. But I use regular olive oil with this, which has kind of a green color. It's darker. And so the oil didn't turn out golden, but it's still potent. So if you want golden, you can go with a light olive oil instead of both are extra virgin, just this one is light. And you don't have to measure, but I just wanted you to see that it's only going to take about a cup of oil. You want to cover your herbs by about 1 inch. So if you remember, you can put a mark with a Sharpie on your jar where your herbs came, and just go 1 inch above it. And then you want to give it a shake. And when you strain this, you're going to lose, depending on how you strain it, you're going to lose between 1/4 of a cup and 1/3 of a cup of oil. Just because it soaks into the herb and you can't get all of it back out. So this is pretty thick. And something else you need to keep in mind when you're making this, I want to have at least a cup of oil when I strain it in order to make a couple of jars of calendula ointment. So I'm going to add another half a cup of oil.
To account for waste.
To account for waste.
Okay.
And just because I know that, that calendula is going to soak up the oil. And
But other herbs might not soak it up that much. So this is a trick you've learned.
This is just something I monitored the last time, when I did a class and we made this voodoo salve.
Okay.
And I knew how much oil had gone in and measured how much came out. And when it's time to strain,
You just take a fine mesh strainer, put it over a bowl, and dump.
So how long do you let that soak now?
4 to 6 weeks in a sunny window.
Okay.
Sue, it looked like that when you started, it looked like from the bottle that you had about a cup. So then you just filled it up so that you would have a cup of oil. So the herb change, it looked, I know you also weighed it, but it looked like it went about halfway up. So when you filled it up the rest of the way, then you should come out with close to a cup.
The dried herbs measured just about a cup,
Yeah.
just under a cup, and for 1 ounce. And different herbs are going to be different volumes. Folk tradition method of an oil infusion, just cover it by 1 inch and you'll be good to go. Put it in a sunny window for 4 to 6 weeks, shake it a couple of times every day, then you're ready to strain it. If you want to make the process go faster, you can use a Mr. Coffee mug warmer and just
Oil.
set that on there for about 3 days. You'll get a good oil infusion. I found that in a small jar like this, my oil and herbs burned. They got burned on a Mr. Coffee mug warmer. Had another student use a candle warmer and his herbs burned on a candle warmer. And so another student came up with this idea. Why not get a seed germinating mat? And because it comes with a thermostat, you can control the heat and get just nice gentle heat. So I found that the size of the jar makes a difference. If you want to make a bigger batch than just 2 jars worth of ointment, you can use a quart jar, and as long as you're shaking it up quite a few times a day to keep the heat evenly distributed, you can use a Mr. Coffee mug warmer. Works really well with a half-gallon size mason jar because the jar doesn't sit inside the groove. It sits on the outside, so it gets gentle heat, but it'll take up to 7 days to get a good infusion. So 3 or 4 days, 4 or 5 days, 5 or 6 or 7 with the larger jar, depending on how full they are. So you tell by the color. The oil will start to take on the color of the herb, and that's how you know it's done. So different ways of speeding the process up. And once the process is done, you've got an infused oil that you can turn into a salve, or you can I've used this just straight. I did it on my wasp skin. Just rub the oil into your skin, or you can turn it into a salve or an ointment, which I'm going to demonstrate next. Any questions so far?
Another thing to, even if you're in a big hurry, is you can put the oil and the herbs right on in a pan, and then just stir it, and just and put that over a double boiler. So you've got water underneath, so it's gentle heat coming up, and then just have to stay there and stir it every couple of minutes, every 5 minutes or something. And after about an hour, so if you're in a real hurry, and I'm always in a real hurry, you can do that.
And how long would you do that for?
An hour.
An hour.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so to recap, you can use a double boiler, get some water going in the bottom, put your herbs and oil in the top portion. You have to sit there and stir it, but an hour or 2, when you see the oil take on the color of the herb, you've got an infusion, and then you move on to straining. So I mentioned just letting gravity strain the herbs, just dump and let gravity do the work is one way to strain your herbs. And You can, just put it in the kitchen every time you walk by, just smoosh it. I mean, that's a technical herbal term, right? Smooshing. And just, over the course of the day, get as much oil as you can. You'll probably lose a third of a cup for every cup of oil that you use that way. Another thing you can do, put a muslin cloth in here, pour your oil and herbs into there. The cloth will soak up the oil, but then once most of the oil is gone through, you can do this. And your hands will get messy. You won't get as much oil out of the cloth. It's messy, but that's another way you can do it. And then recently I came across an herbalist who uses a potato ricer. And you just put this in the bottom, pour your oils and herbs in here, close up the top, and it takes some muscle, but squeeze it out, give this to your teenage son or your husband to press out your herbs. So you'll get the most oil this way. You'll only lose maybe a quarter of a cup of oil that way. You can use a tincture press if you have one. They're expensive. You will lose less oil, but they do make a mess of your equipment. So different ways of straining. They all work. Different levels. Okay. Turn this into a salve or an ointment.
So what is that you're pouring?
That's
plantain
oil. This is plantain. So I did this before a remedy making class about a week before. Were you at that class, Heather? You weren't at that class.
I wish I was.
Did you just do a cup? Did you just measure a cup?
I just measured a cup in there.
Okay.
And
I'll be at the next.
So I pre-soaked the plantain in vodka and then made an oil infusion. I think it took 4 or 5 days. And it's just really dark green, so I know it's going to be really potent. So for every cup, you're going to need about 1 to 1.5 ounces of beeswax. It's good to have a little digital scale. This one, it does milliliters, grams, fluid ounces, and ounces. And if you just slightly brush it, it changes. This is very delicate. So there's 1 ounce. I'm going to put that in there. Let's see. There's 1/2 ounce. I'm going to put that in there. So, depending on how much beeswax you use, you'll either get a soft ointment or kind of a stiffer ointment. So I'm going to pass these 2 jars around. One is a chickweed ointment, one is my skin smoothing moisturizer, and you can just scrape it. You can put it on your hands if you want, but you can just kind of get an idea of the difference in the texture. It doesn't matter, if it's soft or hard. It's just whatever you like. So we'll start this one over here. So to get a softer ointment, you use less beeswax. To get a stiffer, you use a little bit more. And we have flame.
Do you like to do something with your herbs right away? Like, do you like to make oil infusions quickly, or and store oil infusions rather than dried herbs, or does it not matter, or what? What do you like?
So, do I like to do something right away with my herbs? In an ideal situation, yes. But it doesn't. You can do this on your schedule. So I harvest herbs, I dry them, I put them in a bottle, I use a food saver to get all the air out, and then when I've got some time that I can do something with my herbs, then I go down to my basement kitchen, my apothecary, and do something with them. So it's on your terms. As long as you're storing your herbs well, you don't have to do something with your herbs right away. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
You're not going to lose anything by waiting.
Yeah, just didn't know if you liked the oil, to keep them in an oil state better, because that's easy to do stuff with, or it doesn't matter.
Yeah. It is easier to keep the oil. It's best to put your infused oils in the refrigerator because they will go rancid more quickly.
That's good to
So,
know.
and then they kind of turn hard
Yeah.
when they're in the refrigerator. But you just pull them out and thaw them. I like to use popsicle sticks or these tongue depressors as stirrers because it's hard to clean silverware, clean beeswax off of silverware. And I can just chuck this.
So does the salve go, I know it's probably a silly question, but does it go rancid? Or does the salve store better than, because you said the oils need to be refrigerated, the salves last longer on the shelf, like you don't have to refrigerate the salves? Okay,
Salves and ointments last longer on the shelf, yes.
okay, and they don't need to be refrigerated,
They do need to be in a cool, dark place.
cool dark place.
But this is gonna make a couple of jars. This will probably last you, depending on how many insect bites or stings or cuts and bruises or whatever that you have. A couple of jars are gonna last you at least a year.
Yeah.
And so, butane burners tend to be very hot. Typically, it would be best to do this in a double boiler. As soon as the beeswax is melted, we're almost there. Then you can add, if you add essential oils, then it becomes a balm.
Oh, really?
Technically, but if you continue to call it a salve or an ointment, nobody's gonna slap your hand. Okay? So I think we're there. That didn't take very long.
What kind of oils do you put in them? What essential
Good
oils?
question. What kind of oils? Essential oils, right? So you can add essential oils to boost the healing properties of the oil, the herb, or you can add essential oils just for their fragrance. When I made the Burns and Boo Boo salve with the Comfrey and the calendula and the St. John's Wort, the St. John's Wort especially has a very strong odor. It was not pleasant to me. And so when we made it in class, I said, use at least 30 drops of lavender. Use enough to mask the scent of the St. John's Wort. So, and it's okay just to use essential oils for their fragrance. When I made calendula golden oil with my granddaughters, they were 4 and 6 at the time when we did it. And I let them pick whatever essential oil they wanted. And the 4-year-old, little Isla, she chose wild orange, and I kept the leftover. She took the jar home, but I kept the leftover, and I just loved it because it smelled so good. And wild orange did nothing to boost calendula, but I didn't care. It smelled so good. So list the herbs that you want with the essential oil, or just do it for fragrance. So I've got some lavender essential oil. What is I think it's 10 to 20 drops per cup of oil. I've got a cup, so. But, you know, that's kind of the rule of thumb starting point. If you want a little bit stronger, make it a little bit stronger. If that's too much for you, back off a little. So, okay, that one's coming out. These pipettes, they come out, the drops come out fast. So I got about 17 drops in there, and it started to smell. Okay, that's enough for me. I'm not real fond of lavender, but it makes a good smelling remedy. So the next thing is just to pour very carefully into the jar. And then you want to let it sit until it's cool before you put the cap on it.
Because if you put the cap on it, then moisture will form at the top. And you don't
Correct.
want the moisture in it.
If you put the cap on the jar when the oil is still warm, moisture will condense on the underside of the cap, and that will grow mold.
Where do you find those jars? Where do you
Good
get
question. Where do I find my jars? Specialty bottle.
yours? Specialty bottle?
Specialtybottle.com.
Okay.
Sometimes you can find them in a health food store. Sometimes you can find them on Amazon.
I got dollar store tiny ones because I wanted to pass them out to some friends. And they were just pink and purple plastic. They worked okay, and then I could give little bits because someone wanted to rub it on her husband's knee. So it was, anyway, they worked too.
Okay, thank you.
Be careful.
Didn't look like a professional, not like that.
So you can get tins, little cosmetic tins will work for salves and ointments and lip balms and stuff like that. You can get plastic containers. You just need to be careful of the plastic because if you put a hot oil in them, they will melt. So it depends on the kind of plastic. I got some PET plastic jars, and I thought if I just let this cool for a while, it should be okay. No. That plastic just didn't take even, a cool down heat. So yeah, the little tins, the little jars, you can get 2-ounce jars. I don't know that I've ever seen 1-ounce jars. Maybe. I have a friend who makes 1-ounce remedies. They're super expensive too. But Go ahead.
Right, they are expensive.
Yeah. I think we were in St. George at a preparedness fair, and there was somebody there selling herbal remedies, and their 1-ounce jar was $30. And I thought, okay, I know how much it cost me to make this. So if I make, I'll sell that for, that size of a jar for $30.
How many? What size is that
That's
jar?
a 4-ounce jar. Just because I don't think it's right to charge, just because the market will bear, I still have a good profit on that size of the jar, depending on the recipe. Some recipes are more involved, but you can make, plantain oil is including the jar, maybe $3 to make that, especially if the herb comes out of your garden and you dry it and do something with it.
I have a question. So, for its drying property, between just putting either a mushed up, great term, mushed up leaf or a reconstituted dry plantain leaf versus a salve. Plantain, and they're all plantain. Will the salve have the same drying capabilities as a straight leaf? You know, do you cut down the medicinal qualities when we add beeswax?
Good question. Do you cut down the quality or the potency
Yeah.
of your remedy by turning a plant into an oil infusion or a salve? In my experience, no. You don't lose the potency. One of the first remedies that I got from Dr. Christopher was his bites and stings, and it's just a plantain ointment. And I mean, it's almost yellow. You can hardly tell there's any plantain in it at all. And but it worked. I've used it on bee stings and wasp stings, and it works. And I've drawn splinters out with it. So I know it works. I know this works even better because it's more potent because of the way that I made it using the vodka as a pre-soak. So they all work.
Okay. Yeah.
You can increase potency by doing a double oil infusion. You can decrease potency by using more oil than herbs. And there's lots of different ways that you can manipulate the outcome of your remedy. But the herbs work.
For kids' purposes, the salves are so much easier than fresh because you just have to rub it on and it's quick. And the leaves, it was harder to chew up, put on, and hold it or get it on the spot, for that. So, the salve is way easier.
Yeah, especially for kids, the salves and ointments are more convenient. We had some college students come to our house for dinner one night, and while dinner was, we were finishing up dinner, Dave took them on a tour of the gardens, and they went into the herb gardens, and one of the girls came running back into the house. She said, "I just got bit by an ant. I'm allergic to ants." And I said, "Okay, well, come back out to the herb garden with me." And I got a plantain leaf, and I said, "This is edible. Are you okay chewing it up?" And you just want to make kind of a slimy wad with it. She grabbed it out of my hand and put it in her mouth and chewed it up, and then I said, "Okay, just slap it on your ant bite." So she slapped it there, and then it was about time to go in for dinner. So, she sat down at the table, and food got passed, and she forgot about the wad. And about 20 minutes later, I said, "So how's that ant bite?" And she was like, "I forgot that I got bit." So if you have, a way to, hold it on, wrap it with gauze or something, poultices, compresses work really well. But if you've got a handy salve, they work just as well. For snake bite, I might go with a lot of plantain, mushed up plantain.
Right on it.
But I might mix it with some plantain oil, just to boost the potency. So whatever you've got on hand, whatever's handy, if this works fine, that's going to work fine too. Good questions. We're pretty much done. Anything at the bottom of your handout? The dates and of my garden tours and classes. More details are always posted at LDS Prepper Store. That's where you can register. The garden tours are free, but if you register, then you can download a fact sheet packet for the herbs, my top 15. And that'll help you kind of see what I've got that's on my list, and you can say, well, I like that, and I like this, and I like that, and no, not that one. You can create your own list. That's kind of a springboard for that. So, hope to see you there.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming.